Let's begin our business of shaping policy and advancing development today by looking at food inflation and the impact on the global economy. This has been of concern to many analysts and many economists across the world, as even the rich nations, they are not left out of the hook. They are also battling with food inflation. According to data released by OECD, 15 nations across the industrialized nations, about 38 of them, are also battling with food inflation, which is at about 5.2%. Also, according to data released by Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria is also battling with inflation at the rate of 31.7% as of February. What will be the implication of these on the global economy and by extension the Nigeria economy? Let's shift the conversation to our guest analyst who joins us virtually. We're being joined by Olalekan Paul, who is an analyst, a researcher, and also a marine resources management, and is also an aquaculture, a researcher and expert in aquaculture. Glad to have you join us, Paul Olalekan.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be on the show today again.
Great. Now, I would like you to give us a privilege of some of the researches you've done as a researcher. Let's talk about food inflation and how it's impacting the global economy. In your own view and assessment, how did we get to this level where most nations, even the rich nations, are not even out of the hook? They are also battling with food inflation. Give us a background to these and what will you make of this development?
Thank you very much. If we need to understand this, we need to start from the basis. The inflation itself, what is inflation? If you look at inflation, according to many economics textbook or scientific definition, they will tell you it's a general rise in prices, which causes decline in purchasing power of people, and this will be likely caused by maybe increase in production, labor costs, transportation costs, climate changes, which we are facing right now. It may be due to hoarding of food. It may be to some other causes, maybe natural disaster. It may be due to war, and it may be due to pandemics, and so on and so forth. So if I want to answer your question, how do we get to this point right now? There are so many things that we can look at. First, 2019, 2020, we have the COVID pandemic that stopped everything. All the supply chains across the globe are being affected. Food or many commodities are produced in different areas of the world, and they are transported, they are moved from one location to another part of the world. And when the pandemic came, there's no movement, shipping, land transportation, and every other supply chain were being disrupted. So that's number one. After then, immediately the COVID was a bit going. We are happy we are overcoming COVID 2021, early 2022. We have the crisis in Europe, the European crisis, Ukraine, Russian war began. And we know that Russia and Ukraine, they are hub of commodity production, especially food, grain, and so on and so forth. That's another disruption in supply chain, in global trade, supply of energy, gases, petroleum, and so on and so forth. This also affected prices of commodities across the globe. Then there's battle of climate change. Production in several areas, desertification is occurring. People cannot produce the way they are supposed to produce. This also affects production, and when production declines, what will happen to prices? It goes up because supply is now higher than demand is now higher than supply, and that is another one. Another reason is, like, for example, in our own location, Nigeria, we have the issue of insecurity in various areas where we produce food, and not just in Nigeria, and several other places where you have insurgency, bandits, and all these terrorists are affecting production of commodity food. And this crisis across the globe are some of the factors that are responsible for high inflation across several countries in the world. If you go to places like Haiti and some other Pacific nations, gangs are there that are disturbing production and the country as a whole. So these are some of the things. Some other countries, there are change of government, there are coup, especially in West Africa, where you have coup d'etat in several countries. So these are instabilities in policy, instability in the war situation is there, climate change is there, the pandemic that came. So these are some of the reasons why we are where we are today. But the good news is what the headline we have seen that in some of the rich nations, food inflation especially is actually going down. So that's a good news.
Is dropping in some rich nations, dropping from 6.2% in January to about 5.3% now. What are the reasons, and why is it just the rich nations?
That's a very good question. Well, from the research, from the statistics that they brought out, there are two they pointed out. One is that the supply chain of commodities, food commodities, being normalized. The pandemic is over. So there's and even the crisis in Ukraine, Russia, there is this agreement that a commodity can also move out there. So there have been shipments from Ukraine to other parts of Europe and other rich nations. So supply chain has been normalized. Food commodity is being moved to where it is actually needed. That's number one. Number two is that they also mentioned that there is reduction in gas prices. Energy is one critical commodity that a nation or community of people need to survive. So in those rich nations that the survey has been carried out, it was discovered that there was lower in energy prices. I think this is largely due to the response of the government of this nation, because when Russia is a very big player in the energy sector. So when the crisis came, they came up. There was a reduction in some taxes, what we could refer to as subsidy. There's a whole lot of subsidy here and there in the energy sector, which eventually lead to the reduction in prices of gas or energy commodity in those nations. So those are the really two factors that that were mentioned that were responsible for this lower dropping of food inflation.
Now, looking at the result being recorded by these rich nations, about 38 industrialized nations, according to survey being done recently. Now, what do you think they are doing differently that other developing nations, especially Africa or countries like Nigeria and the rest of them, could do to also make impact and also achieve better results when it comes to tackling food inflation?
Thank you very much. Like what the factor responsible that was mentioned from the survey, one, supply chain has been normalized across those nations. They got the commodity, the resources, the food needed at when they need it, they got it through to their country.
Naturally, one would assume that the developing nations would be more into agriculture and better able to have food security. But we find that the reverse is the case, as the industrialized nation have been able to achieve food security, even with the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine invasion. They have been able to recover faster than the developing nations. Could you speak to that?
I think what is responsible for this is that most of these developed countries, they don't take what we refer to as a fire brigade approach. No, they have a strategy or policy in place that have maybe a short time, medium time, and long time strategy, and they follow through to this. They stick true to their plan. Unlike for us in most developing country, we take what I refer to as fire brigade approach. We are reactionary. We don't really plan ahead or be ahead of this issue. Most of the country, they will have known what is going to happen in 2 years, in 3 years, based on climate change, based on other crises, and they will have prepared towards that before the shock will come, they will have prepared an absorber on ground. But for us in this developing nation, most of the time the crisis will have come into our face before we begin to react to it. So that's one of the biggest issues. For example, in Nigeria, in the last let me say 5-6 years, it is clear to every one of us that where food is being produced majorly in this country, those places have been the epicenter of killing, of crisis, insecurity. And we have been living with it. We didn't really pay serious attention to it. And that is what we are facing today. We are facing food insecurity today because we can't produce as we used to produce before. Those hub of production can no longer do that. The people there have actually run away because they can't go to the farm. I go to the field a lot. I go to farm a lot. I go to villages where this thing being produced. Now, when you talk to people, they say they can't go because they are afraid of being killed. So this is what we are facing. And this is what we need to learn from developed nation. We should have a program on ground that when something is happening, we should not wait until it gets to a crisis situation before we start working towards, before we have a strategy that we can use to prevent it. You know, they always say prevention is better than cure. It's cheaper to spend money to prevent than when you want to cure. You spend so much money and it's going to cause a lot of crisis. That's why we are facing what we are facing today. That's why those developed nations, they are far, far, far more better than we in developing nations. All of them passed through this crisis during towards the end of last year. UK and many countries in Europe, everybody is shouting, but today you can see that this thing is going down because they have a strategy, they have a plan, and they stick to this plan. So we need to learn from them on these angles.
All right. Let's look at the disruption that has been brought to the global economy by the invasion of Ukraine and the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. Now, it's a given reality that in the next few months, no one can tell where this will go. But what has this brought on global economy, and what are the opportunities that could be taken advantage of looking at this crisis? It has disrupted the global supply chain. But in every problem, you could always have opportunities. What are the opportunities here for African nations? And there are things to be imbibed as regards the ongoing development between these countries.
Yeah, just like you have said, in every situation, in every difficult situation, challenges, there will always be opportunity. Like when Russia-Ukraine war started, places like Egypt, they cannot even get bread any longer because they depend solely on importation from Ukraine, and the commodity was not coming. So for me, this is an opportunity for us, especially in Africa. I don't want to go to Europe or other places right now. We in Africa, in Nigeria, we need to key into it. Like 20 years ago, I remember we were experimenting wheat production in Nigeria, and there was this, we are so skeptical if it's going to grow. But today, we know very well that wheat can grow in Nigeria. Before pre-2015, a lot of us know that we can produce rice in Nigeria. but because we didn't really take it serious, nobody really care. We still depend largely on importation of rice. But from 2015 till now, we know that we can do rice in Nigeria, process rice in Nigeria to meet the highest quality. So this is an opportunity for private sector, investors, and of course, government have a very big role to play. Why I actually talk about government is that they need to provide enabling environment condition for private sector to actually tap in. There are a lot of investors. There are a lot of people who has money, who want to invest in agricultural development in Nigeria, but they are afraid of the environment that is their investment is going to be secured. So for us, it's an opportunity to look at this crisis happening there. Let me give you a very specific example. Fertilizer. Before now, a lot of people import fertilizer from Russia, from Ukraine, from that region. But right now, because of the crisis, it is difficult. And Nigeria is one country that produces fertilizer. And I can tell you, since that crisis started, exportation of fertilizer from Nigeria has soared, has increased, because people now know that they cannot go to that region to get fertilizer, especially country from East Africa and other sub-region, West Africa here. They quickly turn to Nigeria to buy their fertilizer. This is an opportunity to expand our fertilizer production. We have petroleum, petrochemical products, which we can use for this fertilizer and other things. So there are key opportunities in this crisis that's coming on, and we should leverage on it to now stabilize ourselves, to make ourselves a big players in this sector, something like fertilizer, something like wheat, something like rice, another commodity. Maize, corn is another big commodity that a lot of companies, if you remember, maybe early February, some big company in Nigeria, they have to write to the government that they no longer buy corn or maize in Nigeria to really support government of food security agenda of the government. When I saw that, for me, it is a slap on our face. We have the land, we have the good climatic condition, arable land, we have the rain for everything ready, even want to do irrigation, dry season. We have the river, we have the natural water resources available to do this. So the crisis is there, but for all there is window of opportunity to establish ourselves as big players in this commodity production. And we can support other parts of Africa.
Knowing that the
and
opportunity
other
is there,
developing
but
countries.
does Nigeria, for instance, have the capacity to take advantage of this opportunity? Nigeria currently struggles with a very high food inflation of over 31%, and it even varies from state to state. Yes, Nigeria has the arable land, but what about the capacity needed? What will enable food security? Modern farming is what is in vogue now, mechanized farming. What about all of this? How will it come to be that Nigeria first is self-sufficient before exporting to other nations?
I mentioned this earlier. What we need in Nigeria now is enabling environment. This security crisis in the middle belt, in the northern part, of course, in every part of Nigeria, if this is tackled, the business of production, somebody said government has no business in doing business. I agree with such person. Government doesn't need to put their hand in doing business. What government need to do for us is to provide policy and ease of doing business, enabling environment, tackling insecurity. I tell you, if insecurity is tackled in Nigeria, there are investors. All these foreign direct investment we are looking for, it will come naturally. A lot of companies, a lot of people, a lot of investment are only waiting for security situation in Nigeria to go. They will flood into Nigeria. I know companies in Nigeria that are struggling, that are trying to make ends meet because they have this money is there, but they don't really want to put it there. So in terms of capacity, Nigeria have the capacity. There are individual, there are private sector, because when you're talking about mechanized farming, it is not the smallholder farmer that will do this. This is big time player. It requires a huge investment, and nobody wants to invest where they are not sure if it's going to be secured or not. So that's what we're having. For me, my advice first, that government provide enabling environment, tackling insecurity, making sure where we need to do this production is secure, and you'll be shocked the number of investments that will come into the sector. Rice is a very good example I always make use of, because pre-2015, people don't believe we can produce rice that we can eat in Nigeria. They always call it stone rice. They give it various type of name, Abakaliki rice, this type of rice. But today, where people have invested in processing that we polish the rice, that we destone the rice, that we make it to that quality that can go to any part of the world. So this can be replicated in every sector. If the insecurity is no longer there, people will invest. It's a business, and people will do it to make profit, and they are going to produce massively that we are going to be self-sufficient, and also we'll be able to export to other parts of the world. Because when you are producing, you don't just target your local consumption alone, because we need to balance our trade also. And we are having this forex issue today, or Naira weakness today, is simply because we can't balance our trade. We import more than we export. We don't do production that we sell out to earn this dollar. We only spend the little we earn through to buy things from abroad. And that's why the currency is going weaker and weaker every day. If we are able to produce, of course, be self-sufficient, and we're able to sell out of the country, then we earn this dollar, and the more we earn, the higher, the stronger our currency will become.
What will you expect of the government at this critical time when it comes to encouraging local production? What are the critical steps you would expect government to take at this time? And then what will be the impact of private organizations and individuals as regards contributing to the improvement of local production, which is very crucial to improving food inflation in Africa?
There are some critical steps that government need to take. I've mentioned insecurity severally. I don't want to go back, but it's very, very critical, because there's no other thing that they do, that anybody does, if the place is not safe, it will be difficult for people to go into production. Even these smallholder farmers will not go there, who don't need so much money to produce. It will be difficult for them because they believe it is not safe. So it is one critical step that government need to do, is to tackle insecurity. That's number one. Number two, government also should help in, of course, for people to invest. They need ease of doing business is good. There are a whole lot of agencies in Nigeria today. When you want to start business, this one will ask you this paper, this registration, this documentation. There should be an alignment in the agency of the government in order not to affect investors, not to scare investors away. That's number two. Then number three, government should also fund. When I mean funding, there should be this specialized funding for agriculture that people can tap into. There was a time that the Central CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria, is doing this anchor borrowing project. It's a very good thing, because it's a loan, but the rate is so is single digit, is low, that people can easily tap into it, get it, and use it to produce and pay back to the government. Because today, when you want to approach a commercial bank to get loan, it's very, very, apart from being difficult, the rate is very high because the MPR from the government is almost at maybe 27.75%. So before the commercial bank will add their own rate and something, you have almost 30-something% as interest rate. What type of business, what type of profit are you going to make to be able to pay back? So government should also help to get this funding. No, there are all this borrowing they are doing with other international financial organizations. They should structure it in such a way that it's going to be for production, agricultural production, manufacturing, and so on. So because when we produce raw commodity, it's not really enough. We should also try to transform this into value added. And that's why the value of this will increase. Even though when you want to sell to other places, you are going to earn more money than just selling raw commodities. So first, tackle insecurity. Second, alignment of government agencies, not to scare investors away. And third, help to get funding that will be cheaper in interest rates.
This that you said looks like a long-term plan, or at least a medium-term plan. In the immediate, what can be done? Nigeria shut its borders with some countries due to issues of smuggling and the quest for the Nigerian government to boost production in Nigeria. But at this point in time, do you think that it is time to revisit that policy and reopen some borders to allow importation of food from neighboring countries, even though the IMF contests this position?
Yeah, for me, I will not accept IMF position. In fact, from the word go, I don't support closing of border because it is culturally, we have been together for years and we have been doing, there's this cross-border trade that has been going on for ages. So it's something that we need to revisit. If any border is still being closed, because I remember, I think some times back, I learned that government has said they should open every border. But if any border is still being closed by now, I think all borders should be opened. Let this thing flow in, let it flow out, and we shouldn't close border. In fact, it is against some other WTO agreement to do this, except if there's maybe war or other thing among two countries. But apart from that, that shouldn't be it's not, for me, it's not the right policy to put in place. It's something that needs to be revisited, look at some, open this thing, allow some of this commodity to go out and to come in. I remember when this border was shut, the first time when I knew about it, a lot of commodity coming into Nigeria from other countries got wasted on the border because they were bringing into the country and they got to the border, everything, they couldn't come in, and all these things got wasted. And we are feeling the impact because we need it. Like in Nigeria today, I remember some states within Nigeria, maybe Niger State, some weeks back, make that law that no commodity should leave Niger State to other part of Nigeria. No, I just laugh. This shouldn't work because even what they produce, they can't even finish all that they produce. And what they produce, they need other things. There should be exchange of this commodity from state to state and from country to country. So for me, I will also advocate that those policies should be revisited. If any border is still closed, they should be opened.
Now, let's address this issue of depletion of food reserves. According to the Minister of Agri, one of the factors responsible for the rising food inflation in Nigeria is also the depletion of food reserves. How will you assess the management of our food reserves in Nigeria, and what should be done differently this time around to ensure that when you have this kind of crisis, you can have a buffer when it comes to our food reserves?
No, it's a very simple. I don't know why we're not getting it in this part of the world. You know, as an individual, you have a saving account, and every time you keep saving, And when you need, you draw from this saving. But got a time, you are no longer saving and you are drawing. What will happen to what you have? It will be depleted. It's very simple. Nigeria is no longer producing the way we used to produce. Sorry. We no longer produce the way we used to produce. So what they are putting in the reserve is not up to what they used to put in the reserve. And we are taking out more than what we are saving. So it will lead to depletion. And that's what I've said earlier. When we tackle insecurity, we'll be able to produce more and we'll be able to save more. It's still on policy implementation anyway, because if you have a policy, you have a law that a percentage of what is produced in the country should go into the reserve. And we stick to that policy year in, year out. We keep saving certain percentage of what we produce, then there won't be depletion. When we need it, we'll be able to pick up what we need and we continue to save. But if there are people who have been assigned to do that and they are not doing it, and we're not coming back that food is depleting in the reserve, then something is wrong. And this is what is common to almost every sector in Nigeria. There are people who have been assigned to do certain things, and it is not done, and now everybody is facing the repercussion. And there's nothing is done to those people in charge. There's no there's no punishment, there's nothing, nobody is held, there's no accountability, nobody is held responsible. Then it will continue. So for me, the people in charge should be held responsible. They should stick to the law. If it's 20%, 10% of what is produced annually is to be kept in the reserve, that should be stick to. If something happened, they couldn't get that, there should be explanation to the people, to the government, and we know this is why this is happening. So we won't be surprised if there are depletion, because we know the cause of the depletion, the cause of why we couldn't save up to what we are supposed to save. And everybody will understand and work towards a better production. But when there's no explanation, no responsibility, no accountability, then there will be crisis.
What about the issue of price control? There have been advocacy for the institution of a price control board, which the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has said he will set up a price control board. Do you think that will in any way reduce the level of food inflation Nigeria currently experiences? Or in your assessment, would you say that the prices of the food items being sold in Nigeria are justifiable?
For me right now, the price of the food being sold in Nigeria are justifiable. Because as a farmer myself, I know what we aquaculture sector, fish, catfish, I don't know if you eat catfish or not. I can tell you every input prices that we use in a cost of production, everything that we use in producing a kg of catfish. And you go to the market, you don't expect me to sell below my cost of production. That's number one. And you don't also expect me to sell without making margin or profit, because I'm a businessman. So if my cost of production keep increasing every day, the feed we use in producing keep going up every day. And when you ask the feed producer, they will tell you they are importing their raw material to produce the feed. And that's why the cost of feed is going up. And when I buy the feed at very expensive rate, I use it to produce, and you expect me to now sell my fish below the cost of production. Is that possible? Is that business wise? No, it's not possible. So it's justifiable. For me, before price control can work, I believe it can work, but it has to work across board, not just on food or the commodity that has already been produced, what of the input, the resources we use in producing this commodity? Then the price should also be controlled. If that is done, then everybody will know, because it is controlled across board. They will know that, oh, this is how much they are using to produce the commodity. At the end of the day, everybody should be able to estimate how much this commodity should be sold in the market. So when you get to the market and it's being sold far beyond that, so people will know that, oh, this is not justifiable. But for now, nobody control the price of input, and now you want to control the price of the commodity. Is it justifiable? Is it fair?
All right, talking about price control, how easy is that when now Nigerians are battling with the reality of hike in electricity tariffs, which in few days will become a reality? In fact, it's playing out as we speak. You understand that that's going to affect production likely. So how easy it is to advocate for price control in the reality of hike in electricity tariffs and the price of fuel exchange rates, given the economic realities that Nigerians are battling with? So how easy when you talk about the issue of price control?
What I said right now, that for now, price control is not feasible right now, currently. And when I answered the question that what the price of commodity in the market is justifiable, this is exactly what I'm talking about. June last year, when subsidy in petroleum product was removed, especially petroleum, PMS generally, prices of everything soar up completely. Can anybody any government want to come up to say you want to control price? No. For example, in the fish sector, which I'm very, very much familiar with, I know a lot of farmers that are using petrol to pump their water, to change their fish water, fish pond, and so on and so forth. They migrated immediately to gas generator. People quickly convert their generator, instead of using petroleum fuel, to gas. And before you know it, within just 1 or 2 months, the price of gas also soar up. So these are the issues. So before you think of price control of the commodity, you need to think of how to control the price of the input, of the resources, of the cost of production itself. Now, electricity tariff is going up. People were saying it's only the band A. And I asked them, who are the people on band A? These are the company, factories that are manufacturers that are producing. And of course, they are in business. They are going to move these costs, the higher cost, to their product. And at the end of the day, it is you and I who are on band F or band D that is not paying so much high on the electric tariff that we still buy this commodity. So who is paying for it? So the point is that when government is thinking of price control, which is very good, I like the policy, but it has to cut across board. It is not the time to be hiking tariff. One of the factors that was responsible for the OECD countries that was surveyed that the food inflation drop is that the lower prices of gas. So you can see that reason energy cost has gone down, and quickly it reflected on the inflation rate. So, but if we are hiking it, if we are increasing it, petroleum, no subsidy, it has gone up, gas has gone up, electricity is now going up. How do you expect price to go down? It's not possible. So if government want to control, fine. If you hike it, then the control you are going to do on the commodity too is going to be very high. Of course, because you don't expect the people to produce at loss, except you are going to subsidize. And I don't think the government we have today is ready for subsidy.
Looking forward now, if Nigeria is to increase production, what crops do you think Nigeria has comparative advantage so that the production this time will be very intentional? And for some food items that Nigeria has been importing, there's substitute here that Nigeria can focus on.
Thank you. Talking about the crop, we have comparative advantage that we should be very intentional. Maize is number one that we advocate for because maize is a staple that both man and animal feed use a lot. And that's why we're having so much problem. I think over several years, there has been even a ban on exportation of maize because of the high consumption we have over it in Nigeria. So maize, I would say, is number one that we should be very, very intentional about. Then secondly, rice is another commodity. You know, right now we are not self-sufficient. Forget about people saying we have been doing a lot. We are not yet. In fact, we are not there. We are not there yet. Because if we are there, the price of rice will not be where it is. But we should also be intentional about that. Government policy should be more focused on producing local rice. I think reduction on import duty of this processing equipment is a key policy government can put into place, because like you rightly said before, mechanized farming is what we are looking at. So we need, because we are not manufacturing some of these processing equipment in Nigeria, we still import them. So there should be a kind of import duty, if not completely waived, but reduction, so that people can bring in this processing equipment, because not just producing the paddy rice, raw rice is a matter, we can produce that enough, but transforming it into a commodity that will be acceptable to the public is another thing. So tariff waiver or reduction on importation of processing equipment is another good policy government can put in place to do this. Then another thing is wheat. Wheat is, you know, we import a lot of wheat too for flour and some other things that we do. So, and we have seen that it can be produced in Nigeria and like already we are producing. So more effort can be put on that to be able to scale up the production in Nigeria. Those are three high value commodities that I know if we are very, very intentional about it, we are going to be self-sufficient, and not just we being self-sufficient, other countries around us also need it, that we also be buying from us.
Now, I would like you to react to this advisory from the United Nations Food and Agri Organization, which the organization has warned that about 26.5 million Nigerians living in Zamfara, even the FCT and also some part of the north, will experience what we call severe food crisis between June and August this year. What are the peculiarities about the states, and what should be done to avoid this looming crisis in those states?
You know, what these people said, for some of us, it is not new. It's not news. It's something that is expected, because these places you talk about, if you look at it critically right now, these are epicenter of banditry, where people can no longer go to farm to produce anything. And if you remember from the beginning, I've been emphasizing why they have mentioned this, that they are going to experience severe food crisis. It's not only Zamfara, but of course, it's an epicenter. Some states around that, not only them, some states around that region will experience it. And not only them, Nigeria as a whole, because it's going to be across the country. Right now, I've said it earlier, why we are experiencing this high inflation, because the supply of food we have is not meeting the demand. The demand is higher than the supply. We are not producing enough for us to consume. People who used to produce, those areas where they used to produce high volume of food can no longer do that. Not because the land is no longer there, not because the resources, they don't know how to do it any longer. It's simply because the place is not it's not secure for this. It's not safe for them to go into production. So that is the issue. For us to be able to avert that. It's getting late right now because the time is close, but we can still do something around it, tackling this insecurity headlong, for people to be able to go back to farm and produce. Because right now, this is April, in most of those places, that is by May, June, that's when production planting season will begin. What they are going to face right now is the deficit of what they are unable to produce in previous years.
Thank you so much, Akande Olalekan Paul, who's a researcher and aquaculturist, has been talking with us today on global food inflation as it affects the rich nations and also developing nations. Thank you for your time on Early Exchange today.
It's a pleasure.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.